Brilliant.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben. And I will just introduce to our attendees. We are very happy to have Ben today at our platform. Ben is based in Spain, and he's been teaching since 2007. He holds the CELTA and DIP TESOL and has a keen interest in training and development, and now leads a secondary and exam teaching at Amanda School in Bise? Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
No, Baeza.
Baeza, okay, Baeza. And he believes that exam preparation should be fun, motivating, and engaging for everyone. That's a good thing to start with, motivating and engaging for everyone. Welcome, Ben. Floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, everyone, for those technical issues there. So we're talking about developing listening skills, and I think the at B1 is sort of a bit of a clickbait, really. This session applies to anyone teaching English at any and every level, I think, and simply because I am a teacher of teenagers certainly doesn't mean that what I'm presenting here for you today is not relevant to you. Let's have an overview of where we are going in our session. We're going to think about first what it's like to listen in class. And once we've done that, we'll move on to thinking about how learners listen and where we should be focusing our efforts. And you'll see that "we" there has an asterisk. This is a theme that I keep coming back to in this session, that we are busy teachers. And I'm sure, like me, I mean, you are all here. That means that you're all interested in becoming the best versions of yourself as a teacher, right? And I'm sure we would all love to have the most innovative and original resources for every one of our classes, but probably we don't really have time for that. And so a big approach here, or a big feature of this webinar, is how you can adapt your already chock-a-block classes to bring in more of a focus on developing listening skills. And that's where we'll look at sort of simple ways to adapt existing listening texts. Okay? And then towards the end, we'll have time for a Q&A as well. So let's take a look at my classroom a few years ago, before I started doing my DIP TESOL, before I started thinking about how to better teach listening. We have a hand raised from Khadija. Do you want to type your question into the chat? If you have any questions, pop them into the chat, and I'll try and integrate them into the webinar. So we'll bring up the date, we'll bring up the agenda, and we're coming on to some listening. We've been talking about giving advice. And one thing that doesn't change, I'm always going to start a listening with some sort of discussion or some sort of task to help learners access the knowledge they have.
We request all of you to kindly use the link in the chat box. Join us in the new interface page.
And
so
further, to help me know what
we are already running the webinar,
and maybe what language I need to feed in.
Kindly join us there. Thank you so much.
We're not going to do this, but we can think about the topic. It's problems farmers have with water. Okay? So we already have an idea of some things we know or some things we might expect to hear. Right. Now we're going to listen to the man giving the farmer some advice. Which of these best describes the topic? Have a listen and pop in the chat. 1, 2, or 3. What do you think is the best overall summary of the topic?
Not obviously within water on the pump woke up now in the water from up here, blaring took out, right? Now, right, mains water. I'll tell you what, I don't know, not been bought. I'm not in corner where stables. I don't know, is that never worked or anything. You blame where your pond is. Not been bought. I'm not into that. If you, what I'm trying to say is, get no water and find that one drop.
Your request, please use the link in the chat box and join us in the new interface. We are running the webinar in the new link provided in the chat box. Kindly leave this room and join us there. Thank you so much.
I think general consensus is 3, but it's a hard listening. You're probably just sort of grasping onto things. Anyway, you've got the question right. I'm happy as a teacher. I'm going to move on. A detailed task. So, where is there no mains water? Okay. And why?
I'm not obviously within water on the pump and woke up now in the water from up here, blaring took out, right? Now, right, mains water. I'll tell you what, I don't know, not been bought. I'm not in corner where stables. I don't know, is that never worked or anything. You blame where your pond is. Not been bought. I'm not into that. If you, what I'm trying to say is, get no water and find that one drop. She's had the pump there and took out. I'd see with them in glass nearly every day after.
Okay, now, where is there no mains water? It's hard to hear. Yeah, it's a difficult listening. Let me tell you, in preparing this webinar and this workshop, I think I've listened to this 50 times. And I know the answers to these questions. I wrote the questions, but it's still very difficult for me to understand everything. Okay. Anthony, lovely to see you. So there's no mains water at the stables. And why? Well, the pump was removed. But let's have a think about, take a step out of this. How did you feel doing that task, right? Pop in the chat. How did you as a listener feel about that task? Okay, Margie is saying it's vague, frustrated, yeah, difficult to understand, inadequate, overloaded, a little bit confused. Right, you need to look for keywords. And that's interesting that you say that, Julie, because yes, as a proficient speaker and as a teacher, we sort of know the strategies of how to deal with a complex text. But if you imagine a sort of intermediate level learner, maybe not with this text, but with a text that is just as complex for them, do they know, right? Yeah, do they know to grasp those keywords? Do they have those strategies? And it's difficult to understand, it's confusing, it's not a positive experience. And I think actually we need to talk about something of an elephant in the room, that is listening anxiety. Now, a study from Lily Jai in 2015 identified that listening anxiety amongst learners can be caused by a variety of different facets of a listening lesson. The learner themselves might not have confidence in their listening ability or in their language ability. Like we were saying, Julie, they might be lacking strategies to deal with the listening text. They might have comprehension issues, or the comprehension task might be asking too much of them. It might be too complex. The listening text could be too complex or above their level, or with an accent they're unfamiliar with. And also, there could be a fear of negative evaluation. That is that other people in the class, their peers, might look down on them for getting a low mark, or maybe their teacher would be disappointed if they didn't get full marks in the test. All of these things are quite frequent amongst learners. When we do listening in class, it can create listening anxiety. And a more recent study has found that listening anxiety reduces comprehension. Here's one thing you can do. Next time you run a listening in your class, at the end, just ask your learners, okay, how did you feel when I told you that we were going to do a listening today? One of my C1 learners a few weeks ago, I was talking to him about this, and he said that normally when he's listening to something on his own for sort of pleasure, normally he can just about get the gist. He can more or less get to the end and know what happened. But even when he's on his own, when he decides to study listening, when he decides to do a listening for learning English, he blocks. He doesn't understand anything. So listening anxiety is something that can naturally come from just telling students we're going to listen in class. So is there an alternative way for us to deal with the listening in class? Let's try a riff on the gist detail task that might give students a more positive experience. Okay, so we're going to listen to another text, a complex text, not something I do with my learners, but I'm happy doing with you. We're going to hear a middle-aged man called Fred, and he comes from Lancashire in the north of England, so he does have a strong accent. Fred is going to be talking about his working life and experiences as a steeplejack. That's someone who, in the past, climbed to the top of industrial chimneys like this to fix and repair the brickwork at the top. Now, the gist task for you is very simple. You're going to listen to this text. It's about 30 seconds. And I want you to write a percentage. How much of the conversation did you understand? All right, let's have a look.
It's somewhat strange. Once you've started, you get like addicted to it. You just live it, you know, like day and night. Think about it, talk about it. Some days you don't want to go, oh, you know, why the hell did I start this job, you know? But once you've got cracking like it, well, I always feel that, you know, when I'm really putting big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney, you know, like when I've got it all up, you know, it's a work of art, you know, a masterpiece.
Okay. Write your percentage down. You don't need to share it in the chat if you don't want to. Right. Normally in class, I'd let learners keep this quite private. If they want to share it with their partner, if they're comfortable sharing it, and I might encourage them to reflect on why they put that percentage. Very well done, Anthony. Good job. Now, we would move into a detailed task. So again, we'll do this. I want you to listen, and on a piece of paper, write down important words you hear. Now, you don't want to be writing everything down, right? This isn't a dictation exercise. It's just about you noting down words that you think are important in the global idea of the message, okay, of the text. All right?
It's somewhat strange. Once you've started, you get like addicted to it. You just live it, you know, like day and night. Think about it, talk about it. Some days you don't want to go, oh, you know, why the hell did I start this job, you know? But once you've got cracking like it, well, I always feel that, you know, when I'm really putting big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney, you know, like when I've got it all up, you know, it's a work of art, you know, a masterpiece.
And then in class, I would do a paired feedback. So I get learners to reconstruct the text with their partner. So why don't you just pop in the chat some of the important words that you wrote down? Okay, so Slovena said, addicted to it, top of a chimney, masterpiece. Right. Addicted, why didn't I start? Get cracking, pile of stagings. We'll come to that, Anthony, don't worry. Strange, top of a chimney, don't want to go, right? Masterpiece, cracking. Now, if you do this with learners and get them to note these down, then talk about what they heard, then I would lead some concept checking questions to extract the key ideas from the text. And I'd probably get learners then to write a percentage down again. Think about if that number has changed from the first time to the second time. Normally it does go up a bit. Finally, put in the chat, apart from Fred's accent, which we know adds a complexity to the text, what made the text difficult to understand? Okay, so not having knowledge, unnecessary fillers and sounds. That's interesting, Margie. Come back to that quite a lot later. So Savina is saying that you need knowledge of the topic, which is an interesting thing for a listening, isn't it? Because do you need to have expert knowledge of the topic to do well? Possibly you do. Yeah, Maria, the accent is complex. There are other things going on as well. Okay.
Request to keep your mics muted, please, because it creates disruption to the speaker. Thank you so much.
Background noise perhaps. Yeah, and the interesting thing, you see, is that if we think about printed material or published material, that I think back in 1987, Susan Shearing was saying that in spite of the claims made in a lot of course materials to teach listening, actually when you look closely, you find that the material tests rather than teaches. I had the privilege of seeing Anthony, who was here in the webinar, give a session on listening on Thursday, and he was making the point that actually the way we teach listening skills is very closely linked to the way we teach reading skills, and that really hasn't changed in 60, 70 years. And so maybe then, I think a lot of us are aware of this idea that our course books and the material we use probably tests more than it teaches. And maybe then the ambitious teachers, probably those of us here, well, we go away and we maybe bring in extra things and extra materials, right? And it's not as if there isn't a shortage of extra resources that you can bring in. But certainly the problem I have as a teacher is that the main material I have to teach is so big and so involved, and there are so many pressures on me as a teacher that I'd love to bring in some Sheila Thorne or some Mark Hancock lessons. I don't have time. And And if look at this page from my B1 book, Open World, that in a 60-minute lesson, I should probably be doing some grammar, some vocabulary, and some listening. I certainly don't have time to do anything else from here. So I think then as a teacher, often we're left to saying two things. If we've got students in our class who are struggling with listening, often it's not all of them. There will be some who are getting 7 and 8 out of 10, and there will be some who are getting 4 and 5. And I think the ones who are getting 4 and 5, well, our choices as a teacher are either to do more listening in class or to tell the learner, right, go home, watch a series, listen to a podcast. The question is how effective these methods are, right? If we're doing more listening in class, well, it's sort of, I can't think of an analogy. It's like someone who's been to no, I'm not going to take that any further. That's going down a very dark road. But if we do more listening in class, well, the idea is that if someone is struggling with listening in the first place, well, giving them more of it, it might make them a more proficient exam doer. It might make them better at doing a particular type of task, but it's not going to help them become a better listener. And it might even add to their sense of failure. If you can't listen the first time, well, listening again and again and again, or to more of the same thing, just makes it more frustrating. And sending students home to listen to things and do things on their own, well, one of the questions we can ask is, how much unknown lexis can a listener deal with? And there's no fixed answer for this. The general consensus is that a learner can probably handle about 10% of unknown lexis in a text, listening lexis. And so, again, if I'm thinking about my teenagers, well, they probably go home, watch a series in English, find it's too difficult, and don't do it again. And so I think these are not really solutions. And for different reasons, I think this has led some people to say that listening is like a holy grail, like it's the Cinderella skill of English language teaching. I argue it's not, actually. I think it's just a well-kept secret that's hidden for later. The sentence is the wrong way around. I've never been able to say it in the right way. Because certainly when I did my initial training as a teacher, I was taught to do discussion task, gist, detail, discussion task, or writing, or something else, right? And it always follows that pre, gist, detail, post, always. And actually, when I started doing more work in ALT and I got my my diploma and I'm doing a lot more reading and action research, people have been talking about how to teach listening for years. Decoding and bottom-up processing and phonology is not a new thing. But people don't seem to be talking about it. So actually, the only bit of theory today, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, so Amini is saying in the chat, a person can say more words in a specific period of time than they can listen to. That's probably, yeah, that's true. So thinking about how people listen, right, the general consensus of how listening works is that learners will listeners will identify sounds, then they find words, put those words into sentences, build the meaning from the sentences, and that builds the text. And I think we all understand that this is something that goes up and down, your bottom up, your top down. Anthony has made the point very succinctly in elsewhere, and I entirely agree with it, that bottom up and top down are not mutually exclusive. And I think if you ever read books or see approaches that say this focuses on a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, it's false, because we need both the top-down and the bottom-up to work in tandem to build meaning and to get something from any text. But I think what's fair is that in a lot of our listening teaching, we don't focus much on developing the bottom-up, on focusing on the decoding of finding phonology in the listening and helping learners identify the phonological features of listening and thinking about why listening might be difficult and what things were hard for them. And so I think for me that is the key. So a listener who has difficulties in identifying words in connected speech has no key to unlock the text. It doesn't matter how stimulating it is. And so offering them more listening simply adds to their sense of failure. Right? And I think then as teachers, what that means for us is that we need to think about how we can hack our existing listening materials to develop learners' decoding skills. Okay? Let's look at 5 easy things you can do to hack your listenings. Okay? The first is a micro-listening gap fill. So I've taken an excerpt from a listening text. I've edited it very quickly using Audacity, and I'll show you, I'll give you a link at the end to show you how you can use that. And I've written a sentence. We've got the start of the sentence and the end of it. You're probably in reverse. And in brackets at the end, you've got how many syllables are missing. Okay? We're going to listen to the excerpt, and I'd like you to write in the chat what words are missing in that space.
I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance. I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance. I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance.
Okay, here's what it is. Well done if you got it. So I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance. Now, we're not stopping there. There is one crucial step that I'm going to challenge you all. The next time you do a listening lesson, add this step. Get your learners together with a partner and ask them, what do you spot? Give them a chance to listen again and think about the phonology. So, let's listen again. What do you spot about the connected speech in this gap?
I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance. I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance. I still think it would be exciting if I get the chance.
Okay, what did you notice? Yeah, so there's a weak form. Yeah, we've got would be. So there's a couple of interesting things here. Is that, yeah, we've got it would be. The T is elided. And then we've got, so it would be, it would be, it would be, it would be. And learners might be expecting to hear sort of the citation form, right? The form of the words in their head, the ideal version. It would be, it would be. and we've also got gather, 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 right? And just, you don't have to go into this sort of detail. I'll show you later an easier way of doing this, but giving learners a chance to identify when this connected speech happens and what they hear or don't hear takes them a step further to helping them make connections between the sounds and the words. Let's turn this on its head. Right? I've taken this from Mark Hancock. Badly filled gaps. So we've got a gap fill here, but the words in bold are not correct. The spelling is wrong. So I want you to listen and write in the chat what the correct words are.
It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start. It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start. It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start.
Very good, Sarah. Well done. So the top one, yeah, awful waiting so long. And main act. Right, the main act. Right, and again, the question is, that we ask our learners, well, what do you spot? So what happens here? Why is it that a learner might have written awful wait in or my main neck?
It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start. It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start. It was awful waiting so long for the main act to start.
So what do you spot? Right. So this is something called catenation. Catenation. I'll put it in the chat for you. And it's where, because of connected speech, the boundaries between words becomes less clear. And it can sound to listeners as though words become other words. Waiting, wait in, the main act, the main act, my neck. Right? This is something that a learner wrote. This is what one of my learners heard. And so this is something that can happen in connected speech. Drawing learners' attention to this can really help them, again, see that connection between sound and writing. We spoke earlier about strategies. One of the strategies that we have as skilled proficient listeners is prediction and monitoring. So that means that we can predict what words are going to come next or what information we expect to hear. And as we're making those predictions, we then monitor them so that when we hear something that is not what we wanted to hear, well, we can change our prediction and catch up. For listeners, especially at the intermediate or lower level, they often lack the monitoring skill. So they make that prediction about what information is coming. But then when they don't hear it, they get a bit stuck and they stop and try to catch up. And in that trying to catch up, they get lost. It's what John Field refers to as the garden path effect. You predict where you're going or where the listening is going to take you. And when it doesn't take you there, you don't know how to get back. I've stolen this activity, or loaned this activity, from Mark Hancock's latest book. It's called a tricktation. Now, I'll demonstrate it for you first. I'm going to ask you to write down, just do it on a piece of paper in front of you. You don't need to do it in the chat. Write down the words I tell you. So, for example, I dictate the dresses. Now, you could write it like this. You could write something else. The dresses. Then, I'll dictate part B. I'm going to add 1 or 2 syllables to the dictation from part A. And you need to either add the syllables or correct what you wrote. So, part A, the dresses. Part B, the dress is nice. Okay, let's have a go at this. So, on a piece of paper in front of you, here are 4 short phrases. I'll say them twice. Got up at 8. Got up at 8. You've got a point. You've got a point. The laptop screen. The laptop screen. Watch. Watch. Okay. Now, here's what I was saying for part A. Okay. Now, you're going to, for part B, either add the syllable or see how it changes. Got a potato. Got a potato. You've got appointments. You've got appointments. The laptop screen in black. The laptop screen in black. What's your name? What's your name? Right, and there. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now, the key with this, if you do an activity like this with your learners, the key is that when you show them part B, when you do part B, they don't get frustrated because what they wrote is wrong, because they wrote what they heard. And that's something that I stress a lot when I'm doing listening practice and when I'm getting learners to write what they hear, is that the right answer is you write what you hear. And even if it looks like gobbledygook, getting them to write down some representation of what they hear helps them to understand what those sounds are. I'll show you at the end the book I got this from. A fourth thing that you can do, we're not going to do it here, but it is interesting for learners. It's a function word gap fill. So I've taken an audio script from one of the listenings in my book, and I've simply taken out the function words, things like of, than, to, and for. I got the learners to read through the script first and write what they thought the missing words were. They were able to complete the text with no difficulty. I got them to listen to check. All fine. But then I got them to listen again. And I asked them to look at the words they'd written and to think about what they expected it to hear like, to sound like, and what they actually heard. Just giving them a chance. Again, what do you spot? What was different? Right? This is also interesting because it matches some recent research that suggests that learners who are listening and reading at the same time actually show improvements in both their reading and listening skills to a greater extent than those who are just reading or just listening. And so you might think that, reading and listening, well, it takes away the test of the listening comprehension. actually it can assist it. And doing a listening comprehension where learners have the text to read from is still just as challenging, and still means that they need to be able to interpret the text, but they can match the sound form and the written form together at the same time. It can be quite interesting for them and quite a useful task to do. Finally, the big one for What Do You Spot? Here's the script from the text we heard earlier. We're going to listen to it again. I want you to listen and read it. And then in the chat, what? Yes, Anthony, I will tell you later because I can't remember the name right now. But yes, it's very interesting, that research. I'll send you the paper. Yeah, we're going to read this and listen. And then I want you to tell me in the chat what connected speech you noticed in this text. And then we'll look at what I found as well. Okay? By the way, for those of you who weren't sure, get cracking is an informal expression that means to start doing an activity. And stagings, Anthony, if you remember at the beginning, the picture I showed of Fred with the chimney behind, the stagings are like the scaffolding around the top. Yeah. Okay, so let's listen. What connected speech do you notice?
It's something strange. Once you've started, you get like addicted to it. You just live it, you know, like day and night. Think about it, talk about it. Some days you don't want to go, oh, you know, how the hell did I start this job, you know? But once you've got cracking like it, well, I always feel that, you know, when I'm really putting big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney, you know, like when I've got it all up, you know, it's a work of art, you know, a masterpiece.
Okay. I'll play that for you again. If you want to pop in the chat what you heard.
It's something strange. Once you've started, you get like addicted to it. You just live it, you know, like day and night. Think about it, talk about it. Some days you don't want to go, oh, you know, how the hell did I start this job, you know? But once you've got cracking like it, well, I always feel that, you know, when I'm really putting big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney, you know, like when I've got it all up, you know, it's a work of art, you know, a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so let's have a look. There's a lot of interesting features here. So first of all, we've got it's something strange. I think someone noticed this in the chat. So this is a regional variation where something becomes summit.
It's something strange. It's something strange.
You've got a weak pronoun, and that's very interesting because we tend to see in normal fast speech that pronouns are normally almost impossible to hear. And learners won't be expecting that. So it's worth pointing out that pronouns are usually weak to the point of being inaudible. You've also got then the elision of the final T in get.
You get.
Right? So not you get, you get. We've got linking w here between to and it, so it becomes to it.
To it, to it, to it, to it.
Right. There's a linking y between day and night, day and night.
Day and night, day and night.
Then there's linking and weak function words here. Don't want to go becomes don't want to go.
Yeah, you don't want to go. Yeah, you don't want to go.
If you're using authentic texts in your class, this is a very interesting thing to teach learners. False starts are a natural part of spoken conversation. And it's something that maybe we don't expect in spoken English, and certainly not something that we teach. Learners need to understand that the speakers are going to make false starts in their speaking, and it can make things complicated to hear. But they also need to understand that it's an acceptable thing for them to do as speakers. Let's listen to this. I love it. Function words are weak and they're often almost inaudible.
Big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney and all that. Big pile of stagings up round top of a chimney and all that.
A big pile of stagings around the top of a chimney. That's what he was saying. And finally, we've got catenation, blurring boundaries of words.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that.
That's it, there's no more. Now, I've included these because more or less you've got here 8 different examples of what connected speech is. And you might be looking at this and thinking, I can't do that. My learners aren't going to get that. Well, they don't need to. It can become something very simple. It's enough for learners to express this in their own words. And actually, I can show you what I've done with my learners. So going back to this page that I used or showed you at the start, and you've got listening here. Well, let's look at this a bit more closely. Right? We've got a discussion task to activate schemata. It's a couple of bits of listening training for the exam and a listening task. And what I did, right, to show you how I use this with my learners, pink is an existing task and blue is a hacked task. So where I've introduced a bit more decoding. To start with, I had learners activating their schemata by talking about entertainment, getting them to show me what they knew, and I could feed in some language that they might need for the listening. Then we moved on to the listening training in the book because I thought this was a good activity to do and helped them sort of identify the gist, building that strategy of things to grab onto. And then we did the alternative gist task. You'll see there are 3 numbers because this listening task had 3 short texts. So you'll see my learners were writing down how much they understood. And from this, I could see that, okay, the first text and the third were more complex for them than the second. So that's then what I focused more time on, right? If a listening is especially easy for them, yes, we can use it to build their confidence, but also if time is limited, I want to know where to focus my efforts. Then we move to a reconstruction task. Right? You'll see here that there are mistakes. There are things here that aren't quite accurate, but this was enough for number 1 and number 3 for learners to reconstruct the text, and then for me to ask my concept checking questions to get the essential information from them, to see that learners were able to get the key ideas from the text. We went back into the course book. We did listening practice. First, I got them to do it from memory, and then they did it with a final listening. And then we did a micro-listening gap fill. I find that if you're doing gap fills like this, 1 or 2 sentences is more than enough. And finally, I got my learners to focus on connected speech. And everything here that I'm showing you on the board, well, this is what my learners gave me. This is what they noticed. Overall, this took 25 minutes. And so we looked earlier at this cognitive model of listening and how we can be focusing more on decoding. We've looked at 2 listening tasks, one that tests and one that teaches. We've thought about this cognitive model and its value to us as listeners, and we've been thinking about easy hacks that allow learners to notice things that they heard or they didn't heard and explore why that might be. And so rather than this being a holy grail or Cinderella moment, actually listening is a language skill that we as busy teachers can develop by hacking our existing listening materials and activities, and by encouraging our learners to reflect on what that they have heard. Now, here is a set of resources for this session. You've got 5 different fact sheets here. One of them is a lesson plan showing you how I've used these materials with my learners. And then you've got 4 fact sheets, 2 of them going into detail about teaching or testing listening and listening anxiety. 1 talking about connected speech for listening. This is everything you need to know to get a basic understanding of it. And finally, some activities you can use to hack listening. And there are more activities here than I've had time to go through today. The QR code is there for you. Here are some additional resources for you. Mark Hancock's Connected Speech for Listeners and Word Recognition for Listeners are great books with short little activities. And do check out his website. If you Google Pronpack, it's very useful, and there's some resources on there. Sylvina's just pointed out, yeah, Richard Caldwell has a botanic walk exercise, which is very good to help learners identify the difference between the ideal form of words in their head and what they might sound like. And you can find that in this book or on his website, Speech in Action. John Field's latest book is fascinating, but not at all practical. But it is a fascinating read if you are a nerd like me. And finally, I'll leave you with this. You can find more resources on my website. It's bencromptonelt.wordpress.com. Please consider signing up to my my newsletter on there to keep up to date. And you can email me at ben.teach@outlook.com as well. And that is the end of my session. I hope it has been good for you. Apologies for the technical hitches that we had at the start. Thank you so much for coming back and seeing it to the end.
Thank you so much, Ben. It was such an enlightening session. Now we are opening the floor for the attendees. If they wish to ask any question to Ben, or they can even type in the chat box, I will be happy to read it out to Ben and relate to him. We also have a link in the chat box that records your feedback for this session, and you will receive a certificate for it. And this session is also being recorded. It will be uploaded on our YouTube channel in the next 24 hours. So if you have any questions, you can open up your mics now and ask Ben directly, or you can even use the chat box and it will be relayed to Ben now. Well, we have lots of thank yous in the chat box, Ben, for you. Very interesting session, very brilliant ideas. We really learned a lot. I'm going to try some syllables activity tomorrow in my class and get you.
Do it. I don't know how it goes. You'll see what I mean when I said before that the session needed the listening.
Yes.
Yeah, it wouldn't have worked if you were just listening to me reading it, you know.
So yeah, we're glad we were able to resolve it soon.
Okay.
Yes, do we have any questions? Another 3 minutes, then we will stop the session here. I think you have explained it so well, so everybody's happy. And we're grateful to you, Ben, honestly.
No, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. If anyone has any questions or anything that comes to mind that you, sort of after this session, please feel free to drop me a line.
So we have Anthony saying something. All right, so Anthony's saying it gave me some good tips. All right.
That's very nice. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Lovely to see you here. And yes, if you do, any of you use these materials in your teaching, please do let me know your experience. This is the start of a new sort of process of action research and work on developing listening skills that I'm doing. This isn't the only session I'll be doing on this. And I would be delighted to hear your feedback on this and your experiences to help me develop this in the future.
Kindly fill in the Google link provided in the chat box. It will also help you receive a certificate for this session and a feedback that will be sent to Ben. I'm sure you don't need much feedback. It was an excellent session. We're grateful to have you today, Ben, and sharing your insight with us was really valuable.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I think there aren't much questions around, so yeah, thank you so much. All right, great. I'm really grateful to all the interacting happening in the chat box, the attendees as well. A thumbs up to all of you. You have been very interactive. It made the session more live, brought more life to it. We were able to go ahead with all the interaction Ben wanted with the session. So I'm really grateful to all of you who were very interactive in the chat box and responding to all the activities while we were going through the session. I would happy to see you again on my future webinars. You can subscribe, follow our social media platforms. We will be having one session in the second week of December, and we have an annual conference coming in March. So stay tuned for that as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great, Ben. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure once again, and we apologize for the technical glitch, but we overcame it. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Hope to see you soon. Bye.